Desmond Price was 44 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, he believed he had built everything a man could want. A construction business he'd grown from a single truck into a 7-figure operation, a home in Atlanta, a 12-year marriage to a woman he had never once stopped trusting. He reached for the shared tablet to pull up a blueprint before dawn, the same way he had 100 mornings before, but the app left open on the screen wasn't his. The messages weren't either. References to a timeline, a name, Broderick, and a dollar figure Desmond recognized immediately: $5 million. The exact amount of the life insurance policy his wife had researched, selected, and placed in front of him to sign. What Desmond didn't know yet was that the man his wife had already paid $15,000 to end his life was not a killer. He was an undercover detective, and every conversation Adrienne ever had with him was recorded. She had no idea the trap she believed she was setting for her husband had been closing around her from the very first meeting. Desmond set the tablet down. He finished his coffee. He went to work. And the man his wife had spent 12 years underestimating had just decided exactly what came next. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning air was crisp as Desmond Price moved through his kitchen with practiced efficiency. At 5:45 a.m., the house was silent, except for the gentle hum of the coffee maker and his work boots on the hardwood floor. He'd been up since 5 and showered, dressed, and ready to tackle the day's first priority: reviewing specs for what could be Price Electric and Build's biggest contract yet. The Buckhead commercial project would triple his usual contract size. Desmond settled at his home office desk, the space reflecting both order and active use. Neatly stacked folders, rolled blueprints in their designated rack, and a wall of photos marking company milestones. His calloused fingers wrapped around the coffee mug as he studied the preliminary numbers his sister Phyllis had prepared. Phyllis had managed his books since he'd started with just a truck and his tools 12 years ago. She'd helped him structure the business properly from day one, insisting on clean records and careful documentation. "Because you're building something that'll last," she'd said. She'd been right. The photo on his desk showed the day they'd opened their first real office. Desmond standing proudly beside the Price Electric and Build sign, Adrienne beaming at his side, Warren Banks grinning with his arm thrown around Desmond's shoulders. Warren had been there from the beginning, too, back when they were roommates in trade school. These days, Warren ran his own PI firm, but their friendship remained as solid as ever. Desmond adjusted his reading glasses, making notes in his precise handwriting. The Buckhead bid needed to be aggressive enough to win, but sustainable enough to deliver excellence. He'd built his reputation on never overpromising and never cutting corners. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Your work is your signature, son. Make it worth something." The house creaked softly as the heating kicked in. Soon, Adrienne would be up, preparing for another day of corporate wellness seminars. She'd been busier lately, expanding her client base, attending more networking events. Sometimes he caught her frowning at her phone, quickly switching screens when he entered the room. He'd attributed it to work stress. Her business was growing too, and growth always brought challenges. Their marriage had settled into comfortable rhythms over 12 years, though lately those rhythms felt slightly offbeat. Adrienne made more comments about his long hours, even though those hours had built everything they had. Her social circle had shifted toward people he didn't know well. Other wellness instructors, business consultants, real estate developers. Small changes, nothing dramatic, but noticeable to a man who'd learned to read blueprints for their finest details. Desmond reached for the tablet they shared. He needed to reference the electrical layout for the Buckhead site. The device lit up, opening to the last screen Adrienne had been viewing. His hand paused mid-reach as he registered what he was seeing. It was a messaging app he didn't recognize, one of those third-party platforms marketed for privacy. The interface was sleek, professional, not the kind of thing casual users typically chose. The most recent conversation thread was open, messages extending down the screen in neat gray bubbles. His coffee cooled untouched as his eyes moved over the words. The language was careful, coded, references to timelines, plans, arrangements. A name appeared several times, Broderick, a figure that made his breath catch. It matched exactly the value of his life insurance policy. And there, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. while he'd slept beside her. I just need this to be over. Desmond sat perfectly still, the morning light strengthening around him. In the distance, he could hear their neighbor's car starting, the regular rhythm of early commuters beginning their day. The familiar sounds of his neighborhood continuing as if nothing had shifted, as if the foundation beneath his feet hadn't just revealed a crack that went all the way down to bedrock. His hands were steady as he set the tablet down exactly where he'd found it. The coffee had gone completely cold, but he drank it anyway. In 20 minutes, he needed to be at the Buckhead site for the morning walkthrough. He would go. He would do his job. He would say nothing to anyone, not yet. Because that's who Desmond Price was, a man who gathered complete information before making a move. A man who built things step by step, with patience and precision. A man who kept every receipt, documented every transaction, and understood that sometimes the most important thing you could do was wait and watch while the full picture emerged. He stood, straightened his work shirt, and picked up his keys. The tablet sat innocently on his desk, its screen dark now, holding secrets he would deal with, but not yet. Not until he knew exactly what he was dealing with. The tablet's screen illuminated the dim office as Desmond began reading more carefully through the messages. His methodical mind catalogued each detail, each casual reference that carried weight beneath its surface. The conversation flowed with the ease of people who had done this many times before, who had developed their own shorthand. "Timeline still good?" one message asked. "Yes." Broker confirmed. "Just waiting on execution." The response from Adrienne. "Remember, patience. These things have to look natural." A message from someone saved as simply B. Desmond's eyes caught on the name that appeared several times throughout the thread. Broderick. It was always in context of arrangements, plans, future discussions. The casual intimacy in their exchanges spoke of long familiarity. Then came the number that made his hands go still. $5,000, written plainly, discussed as something already accounted for, already designated for use. The exact amount of his life insurance policy, the one Adrian had suggested he take out 2 years ago, presenting it as responsible planning for a business owner of his scale. The final message from Adrian, time-stamped 11:47 p.m., sat at the bottom of the screen. "I just need this to be over." While he'd been sleeping beside her, she'd been awake, sending that message. He tried to remember if she'd seemed restless, if he'd felt her move. He couldn't recall. With careful movements, Desmond picked up his phone. He opened the camera app and took several clear photos of the message thread, making sure each significant exchange was captured. He knew from experience working with Warren on various business security matters that documentation was crucial. The app would likely auto-lock soon, and he needed this evidence preserved. Just as he finished, he heard the upstairs floorboards creak. Adrian beginning to stir. Desmond closed the tablet, leaving it exactly as he'd found it. He gathered his site documents and truck keys, maintaining the precise routine of every other morning. When Adrian came downstairs 15 minutes later, he was reviewing the Buckhead specs, coffee mug in hand. She kissed his cheek as she passed, heading for the coffee maker. "Big day at the site?" "Final walkthrough before we submit the bid," he replied, his voice steady. "Should be interesting." "You'll do great, baby. You always do." She smiled warmly, and Desmond wondered how many times she'd performed that exact smile while messaging Broderick. At the Buckhead site, Desmond was flawless. He led the walkthrough with his usual attention to detail, noting potential challenges in the electrical layout, suggesting cost-effective solutions. His site foreman commented later that it was one of their smoothest preliminary assessments yet. No one could have guessed that beneath his composed exterior, Desmond was processing the complete upheaval of his world. During his lunch break, sitting in his truck, he called Warren Banks. When Warren answered with his usual, "What's up, brother?" Desmond's voice remained level. "I need you to pull everything you can find on someone named Broderick Wynn, likely in real estate development, and I need you to be discreet about it." Warren's tone shifted immediately, recognizing something in Desmond's voice. "What am I looking for?" "Everything. Financial records, business dealings, recent activities. And Warren, I need you to check for any connection to Adrian." A pause. "You want to tell me what's going on?" "Not yet. Not until I know more. But I'm sending you some photos. Check your secure email in 5 minutes." "Des, I know, brother. I know. But I need facts first. Complete information." "All right. I'm on it. You know I got you." That evening, Desmond arrived home at his usual time. The house smelled of the chicken curry Adrienne liked to make, music playing softly from the kitchen speaker. She was stirring something on the stove when he walked in, looking up with that same warm smile he'd seen that morning. "How was the walk-through?" "Good. Team's confident about the bid." He kissed her cheek, just as he had hundreds of evenings before. They ate dinner together, discussing their days. Adrienne talked about a difficult client, laughed at something that happened during her morning seminar. Desmond responded appropriately, asked the right questions, maintained the familiar rhythm of their evening routine. Later, lying in bed, he listened to her breathing even out into sleep. The same bed where she'd lain awake the night before, sending that message. He remained still, his mind moving through what he knew and what he still needed to learn. He had made no decisions yet, except one. He would know everything before he made a single move. The darkness felt heavy around him, but his thoughts were crystalline clear. He would wait. He would watch. He would gather every piece of information until the complete picture emerged. Only then would he decide how to proceed. 4 days after discovering the messages, Desmond sat in his office reviewing supply chain reports when Warren Banks walked in without knocking. His friend's expression was carefully neutral, the face he wore when delivering difficult information. "Got that initial dig on Broderick Wynn," Warren said, closing the door. "Commercial real estate developer, operates mainly in the Buckhead and Midtown corridors, about 46 years old. He's got fingers in several major development projects, but he's leveraged to the teeth, takes aggressive positions using other people's money." Desmond set down his pen. "Connected?" "Very. Sits on 3 charitable boards. Regular at the Chamber of Commerce. Name shows up in society photos. The kind of man who builds his whole life on looking legitimate." Warren paused. "There's more, but—" A knock interrupted them. Desmond's assistant opened the door. "Mr. Price? There's a Detective Mercer here to see you. Says it's important." Warren and Desmond exchanged a look. "Show him in," Desmond said. Warren moved to leave, but Desmond shook his head slightly. "Stay." Detective Holt Mercer was lean, sharp-featured, and carried himself with the direct economy of movement that marked career law enforcement. He showed his badge, introduced himself as Organized Crime and Financial Fraud Unit, and got straight to the point. "Mr. Price, my unit runs sting operations targeting insurance fraud-motivated murder-for-hire schemes across Metro Atlanta. We focus specifically on cases where policy beneficiaries attempt to arrange killings to collect payouts." Mercer's eyes were steady on Desmond's face. "6 weeks ago, your wife Adrienne Price made contact with what she believed was a broker connecting clients to contract killers." The room went very quiet. Warren didn't move. "She met twice with an undercover officer posing as a hired killer. At these meetings, she provided a recent photograph of you. a detailed breakdown of your daily schedule and routines, and a cash down payment of $15,000. Mercer paused. The money was withdrawn in increments from a private account opened under her maiden name, Holloway. Desmond's hands were perfectly still on his desk. When he spoke, his voice was level. The target was me. Yes, the stated motivation was collection of a $5 million life insurance policy. Mercer watched Desmond carefully, clearly expecting some kind of collapse. Instead, Desmond asked 3 precise questions. Is she already under arrest? No. We're preparing to move, but what happens to the case if I request time before you make that move? Mercer blinked, surprised. Depends how much time. How long can you hold? 3 weeks, maybe 4, if I need 5. Mercer stared at him. Mr. Price, most people in your situation. I'm not most people, Detective. And I need 5 weeks. Something in Desmond's absolute stillness seemed to reach Mercer. He studied Desmond's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 5 weeks. But I'll need to stay in regular contact. And if anything compromises the case, nothing will compromise your case. You'll have my full cooperation. I just need time to handle some things first. After Mercer left, Warren finally spoke. Des, I need you to expand that investigation. Everything on Broderick Wynn, every connection, every project, every dollar. And I need you to track their contact pattern. When it started, how they communicate, where they meet. Warren nodded. Already on it. What else? That's all for now. I've got calls to make. First call, Phyllis. His sister picked up on the second ring. I need you in my office, now. Bring your laptop and that file from the Carter audit, the one with the forensic accounting breakdown. Second call, Gavin Whitmore, his attorney. 5 words. Protect everything. Start right now. That evening, Desmond pulled into his driveway at his usual time. Through the kitchen window, he could see Adrienne moving around, preparing dinner. The woman who had handed over his photograph to what she believed was a killer. The woman who had detailed his daily routines with murder in mind. He walked into the kitchen. Adrienne turned from the stove, smiling. He kissed her cheek, just as he had hundreds of evenings before. How was your day? He asked. Oh, you know, the usual corporate wellness drama. One of my clients is being impossible about scheduling. She stirred something that smelled like the pasta she often made on Wednesdays. How about yours? Productive, he said. Very productive. She had no idea that she was standing in a kitchen with the most dangerous thing in that room. The morning sun had barely cleared the Atlanta skyline when Desmond walked into Warren's private investigation office. Phyllis was already there, her laptop open, a stack of folders beside her. The office smelled of coffee and determination. Show me everything, Phyllis said without preamble. Desmond laid out 3 items on Warren's desk. The screenshot from the tablet, Detective Mercer's business card, and a preliminary report Warren had compiled on Broderick Wynn. He walked them through it methodically. The messages he'd discovered, Mercer's visit, the undercover operation, the $15,000 in cash payments. Phyllis's fingers were already moving across her keyboard. She hadn't said a word about her feelings, hadn't offered comfort, or expressed shock. Instead, she pulled up Price Electric and Build's financial records from the past 5 years. Start with the insurance policy, she said, her voice clinically precise. When was it initiated? 4 years ago, Desmond answered. Shortly after we crossed 7 figures in annual revenue. Phyllis nodded, typing. Who suggested it? Adrienne. Said we needed to think about responsible financial planning now that the business was growing. Warren leaned forward. She suggested it specifically? More than suggested. Desmond's voice was steady. She did the research, compared providers, ran the numbers on coverage amounts, prepared all the paperwork. I just had to sign. Phyllis's typing stopped. She looked at her brother for a long moment, then resumed with even more intensity. Over the next hour, She reconstructed Adrian's financial movements with surgical precision. Multiple browser tabs opened and closed. Spreadsheets populated with data. Warren made calls to contacts who could access additional records. "Here," Phyllis said finally, turning her laptop screen. 14 months ago, she opened a private account under Holloway. Since then, she's been liquidating personal assets, jewelry, investments, inherited pieces from her grandmother. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic reporting. "How much total?" Warren asked. "Current balance, $310,000. Desmond absorbed this. "She's been planning this for over a year." "Longer," Phyllis said quietly. "The insurance policy wasn't financial planning, Des. It was architecture. She built this 4 years ago and waited for the right moment to use it." Warren's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at Desmond. "Gavin's got the trust restructuring underway. He can have the business assets legally separated from marital property within the 5-week window. All documented, all time-stamped before any arrest." Phyllis reached for an empty binder from her bag. She opened it, began organizing documents into sections. Insurance policy documentation, account statements, liquidation records, the tablet screenshot. Her handwriting was precise as she created tab labels. "What are you calling it?" Warren asked. Phyllis wrote 5 letters on the spine label, her pen pressing hard enough to leave indents. "RCPT. The receipt," she said. "Because when this is done, everyone's going to know exactly what they paid for." She worked in silence for several minutes, organizing chronologically. Then, without looking up, "Des, I need you to pull the original insurance paperwork from your files. I want the actual document with her research notes and your signature. I'll get it this afternoon." "Good." She closed the binder. "This is just the beginning. We'll need everything. Every email, every document, every transaction. When we're done, this binder will tell the whole story." Warren stood, stretched. "I've got more digging to do on Wynn. His financials are complicated. Multiple LLCs, layered holdings, but we'll unravel it." Desmond nodded. "Keep going, both of you." He checked his watch. "I've got a site meeting in 30 minutes. Alone in his truck in the parking lot, Desmond allowed himself one moment. Just one. He remembered Adrian 4 years ago, sitting at their kitchen table with the insurance paperwork spread out, explaining coverage options, smiling when he signed. He had been touched by her diligence, her apparent concern for their future. She had handed him a weapon and watched him load it. The moment passed. He folded it away with the same precise movement he used when storing his tools, closed the compartment, locked it. He started his truck and headed to the job site. He had work to do. The restaurant hadn't changed in 9 years. Same warm lighting, same white tablecloth, same intimate booths where they'd celebrated their 3rd anniversary. Adrian had called ahead for their usual table, the corner spot with the city view. "Remember that night?" she asked, reaching across to touch his hand. Her smile was perfect, practiced. "You were so nervous about the business loan meeting the next day. Now look at you." Desmond smiled back, matching her tone exactly. "Feels like another lifetime." The waiter arrived with wine she'd pre-ordered, the same vintage they'd had that night. Adrienne raised her glass. "To us. To everything we've built together." He clinked glasses, took a measured sip. She'd planned this carefully, layering memories like brush strokes. The wine, the table, the gentle pressure of her fingers on his wrist. "I've been thinking," she said, "maybe we should plan that trip to Lisbon we talked about. Just get away for a while, reconnect. The business can spare you for 2 weeks." Desmond nodded, his expression warm. "Could be nice. The timing might be tricky with the Buckhead contract, but we could look at dates." "That's what I love about you." She squeezed his hand. "Always thinking ahead, always planning. Sometimes I feel like I married the most responsible man in Atlanta." The waiter returned for their orders. Adrian chose the sea bass, her usual. Desmond went with the steak, medium rare. As the waiter walked away, he carefully arranged his next words. "Speaking of planning," he said, keeping his tone casual, "I've been meaning to mention something." The accountant raised a point about the life insurance policy. Apparently, there might be some tax advantages to restructuring the beneficiary designation. He watched her face with the same attention he gave to checking electrical connection. For just a fraction of a second, something moved behind her eyes. Quick calculations, adjustments, contingencies shifting like tumblers in a lock. Then her smile returned, smooth as glass. "Whatever makes sense, baby." Her voice was warm honey. "You know I trust you with all of that financial stuff." He squeezed her hand back. "I'll have Gavin look it over." Their meals arrived. Adrienne told a funny story about one of her corporate clients. Desmond laughed at exactly the right moments. They shared a dessert, chocolate soufflé, another callback to that third anniversary. She kissed him in the parking lot, a perfectly calibrated mix of affection and promise. The next morning, Detective Mercer's name lit up Desmond's phone. They met in a coffee shop 3 miles from the Price Electric office. "She's getting impatient," Mercer said without preamble. 2 more calls to the broker this week, asking why it hasn't happened yet. "What did your undercover tell her?" "That these things require careful timing. That rushing creates mistakes." Mercer pulled out his phone, set it between them. But she wasn't happy with that answer. He pressed play. Adrienne's voice filled the space between them, crystal clear. "I've been patient for 12 years. I need this done." Desmond listened without expression. "Can I get a copy?" Mercer nodded, sent the file. "There's more. She's been asking about specific dates, wanting to know if it can happen while she's teaching a seminar, building an alibi." Later that afternoon, Warren called. "Wynn's been busy. 3 meetings with commercial lenders in the past week. He's positioning for something big, a development deal that needs serious capital. But here's the thing. His current financials don't support it. He's counting money he doesn't have yet. Money that's supposed to come from your death," Warren confirmed. "The timing lines up. He needs the cash injection from the insurance payout to close the deal." That evening, Desmond sat in his parked truck in the driveway. The house lights were on, Adrienne moving around inside, probably making dinner. He pulled out his phone, found the audio file Mercer had sent. He pressed play. "I've been patient for 12 years. I need this done." Her voice was completely steady. No hesitation, no tremor of doubt. Just calm certainty, like ordering coffee or giving directions. 12 years, the entire length of their marriage. He played it once more, then pocketed the phone. He could smell whatever she was cooking. Probably something special. Another piece of her performance. He opened the truck door and walked toward the house. Warren Banks arrived without calling first, a manila envelope tucked under his arm. His expression told Desmond everything before he said a word. "You need to see this," Warren said, closing Desmond's office door. "All of it." He spread the documents across Desmond's desk. Incorporation papers, financial records, communication logs obtained through legal channels. At the center lay an LLC filing dated 11 months ago. The names crisp and clear. Adrienne Holloway and Broderick Wynn. "Look at the structure," Warren said, pointing. "It's set up specifically to receive and manage a large incoming sum. And this," he pulled another document forward. "The private account she's been feeding? This LLC is listed as the beneficiary." Desmond studied the papers, his expression unchanged. The company's stated purpose was printed in bland corporate language: real estate investment and asset management. "There's more," Warren continued, laying out phone records and email threads. Broderick identified the broker. He made the introduction. He coached her through the initial contact. There are calendar entries, meeting times, everything documented. The evidence spread across the desk like a blueprint, each piece connecting to form a complete picture. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was architecture. They had built a business partnership with his death as its foundation. "The timing matters," Warren said. 11 months ago. That's when they started positioning. The LLC, the account structure, the broker research. This wasn't reactive. This was strategy. Desmond picked up the incorporation papers, reading the details again. His wife's maiden name looked foreign there, stripped of the identity she'd built beside him. Or perhaps this was always her true signature, and the woman who shared his name had been the foreign element all along. "She didn't just want me gone," Desmond said quietly. "She wanted what I built. She was going to use my own money to build something new with him." Warren nodded. The insurance payout would have been the seed capital, $5 million flowing straight into their ready-made structure. They had the whole thing mapped out. Desmond's phone buzzed. Phyllis calling. He put her on speaker. "The receipt is updated," she said without greeting. "I've added the LLC documents and the beneficiary designation. The financial trail is complete now. We can show exactly how long they've been planning this." "What about Gavin?" Desmond asked. "Just got off the phone with him," Phyllis replied. "The business trust restructuring is done. Everything's separated from marital property, all documented with clear timestamps. It's legally unassailable." Warren gathered the documents, preparing to file them in his growing case folder. "What do you need from me next?" Desmond looked at the LLC filing one last time before Warren packed it away. Broderick Wynn's signature sat there like a challenge, confident, entitled, certain of his own immunity. "Start building his file," Desmond said. "Everything. I want Broderick standing next to her when this lands." Warren nodded, understanding perfectly. "I'll pull every thread. Business records, development deals, financial statements, anything that shows his role in designing this. He thinks he's insulated," Desmond continued, "that he can hide behind her if it falls apart. Make sure he can't." "Already on it," Warren said. "I've got contacts in commercial real estate. People talk, especially about a developer who's promising money he doesn't have yet." Phyllis's voice came through the speaker again. "The timing works in our favor. If they're arrested simultaneously, neither one gets a chance to craft a story that protects the other." Desmond looked out his office window at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there, Broderick Wynn was probably sitting in his own office, making calls about that development deal, confident in the plan he'd architected, certain that Desmond Price was exactly what Adrian had told him, a simple contractor who wouldn't see it coming. "I'll have the complete file on Broderick by the end of the week," Warren said, gathering his things. "Every meeting, every call, every piece of evidence that proves he was the architect." "Good," Desmond replied. "Start building his file. Everything. I want Broderick standing next to her when this lands." The conference room at Gavin Whitmore's law office felt too small for the weight of what they were about to set in motion. Desmond sat at the head of the table, Warren and Phyllis on either side, while Gavin arranged documents with precise, measured movements. "The divorce filing is ready," Gavin said, sliding a folder forward. "Everything's structured for immediate submission the moment arrests are made. Timing is critical here. We want no window where she could contest asset division." Phyllis opened the receipt, a thick black binder tabbed with military precision. "I've organized everything chronologically," she said. "Starting with the insurance policy research 3 years ago." She turned pages deliberately. "Every document shows her fingerprints. The policy selection, the provider research, the paperwork she prepared for your signature." Warren leaned forward, studying the tabs. "The financial timeline is clear now. 14 months of systematic liquidation into that private account. The LLC formation, the broker payments. It reads like a business plan because that's exactly what it was." "The business trust restructuring is complete," Gavin added. "All company assets are legally separated from marital property. The time-stamped documentation is pristine. Everything was executed weeks before any arrest warrant. It's bulletproof." Desmond picked up the receipt, feeling its weight. Everything that mattered was in there. Not just evidence, but the architecture of betrayal laid bare in paper and ink. "I've added the transcript of her recorded conversation with the undercover officer," Phyllis said quietly, "including the 12 years quote. It's difficult to read." "Good," Desmond replied. "It should be." Warren pulled out his own file, thicker than the receipt. "This is everything on Broderick. Financial records, development deals, communication logs. The broker connection is documented. His role in planning the hit is clear. I'm delivering this to Mercer this afternoon." "Will it be enough?" Desmond asked. "More than enough," Warren assured him. "Mercer says it transforms the case from a single defendant to a conspiracy. They'll arrest them simultaneously. No chance for either one to warn the other or craft a coordinated defense." Gavin studied his legal pad. "The timing sequence is critical. Arrests first, divorce filing immediately after, then the asset protection measures activate automatically. Everything's pre-positioned." They spent another hour reviewing details, synchronizing timestamps, ensuring no gap existed where either Adrian or Broderick could slip through. When they finished, the receipt sat closed on the table, a black book containing the end of a marriage and the beginning of consequence. "Claudette's coming for dinner tonight," Desmond said suddenly. "Adrian's mother." The room went quiet. They all knew Claudette, her genuine warmth, her complete innocence in this. "You don't have to do that," Phyllis said softly. "We could move everything up." "No," Desmond replied. "She deserves one last normal evening. She didn't do anything wrong." Later that night, Desmond sat across from Claudette at his dining room table while Adrienne cleared plates. Claudette talked about her garden, her church group, the normal threads of a life untouched by what was coming. Her affection for him had always been genuine. She saw him clearly in a way her daughter never had. As she was leaving, Claudette pulled him aside in the foyer. Her hand on his arm was warm, maternal. "My daughter can be a lot," she said quietly. "I know that better than anyone. But you're a good man, Desmond. Don't let anybody take that from you." He watched her taillights disappear down the street, thinking about the letter he'd already drafted. Handwritten, factual, carrying no anger. She deserved to hear the truth from him directly, not piece it together from news reports. That would come later. Inside, Adrienne was loading the dishwasher, humming something under her breath. She smiled when he walked in. "Mom always stays too late," she said lightly. "I like your mother," he replied, and meant it. After Adrienne went upstairs, Desmond sat in his office for a long time, looking at the receipt on his desk. Then he picked up his phone and called Mercer. One sentence: tomorrow. The sun was barely cresting the Atlanta skyline when Desmond pulled his truck into the Buckhead construction site. Steam rose from his travel mug as he reviewed the day's workflow sheets, marking inspection points with the same steady precision he'd shown every morning for 20 years. His site foreman, Marcus, approached with questions about the electrical rough-in schedule. Desmond answered each one clearly, his voice carrying its usual calm authority. "You sure about that third-floor timing?" Marcus asked, squinting at the schedule. "Inspector's coming Thursday," Desmond replied. "We'll be ready." He made a note in his battered work journal, the same way he had yesterday. Would tomorrow. The weight of what was coming sat in his chest like a stone, but his hands remained steady. The morning progressed with mechanical normalcy. Desmond walked the site, checked junction boxes, consulted with his crew leads. At 9:45, he approved a materials delivery and signed the invoice without hesitation. The signature looked exactly like every other he'd ever written. 7 minutes later, across town, 2 plainclothes officers walked into the Meridian Conference Center, where Adrienne Price was leading a corporate wellness seminar for 14 financial services employees. They waited until she finished a sentence about workplace mindfulness before approaching the podium. "Adrienne Price?" the lead detective said, loud enough for the room to hear. "You're under arrest for solicitation of murder. conspiracy to commit murder, and financial fraud. The room coordinator would later describe how Adrienne's professional smile froze in place as the officers read her rights, how she maintained perfect posture as they led her out past her stunned attendees, how her heels clicked precisely on the marble floor until the last echo faded. Simultaneously, at the gleaming offices of Wynn Development Group, Broderick Wynn was escorted from a lender meeting in handcuffs. The same charges echoed through his corner office: conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud. By 10:30, their jointly held LLC was frozen. By lunch, Broderick's commercial lenders had received formal notifications that would collapse his entire house of cards. At the construction site, Desmond was reviewing conduit placement when Marcus approached again, phone in hand. His face carried the careful neutrality of a man delivering news he wasn't sure how to frame. "Mr. Price," he said quietly, "don't know if you've seen what's happening, but there's some news about Mrs. Price." "I've seen it," Desmond replied evenly, making another note in his journal. Marcus shifted his weight. "You want to take some time? We can handle things here." "No need," Desmond said. "The inspector's coming Thursday. We've got work to do." He continued his rounds, checking junction boxes, signing off on progress reports. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, but he let each call go to voicemail. At 11:15, when Gavin Whitmore's number appeared, he finally answered. "It's done," Gavin said without preamble. "Divorce papers filed the moment arrests were confirmed. Assets are protected. Business structure is untouched. Everything executed exactly as planned." "Thank you," Desmond replied, and ended the call. He walked to his truck and sat in the familiar quiet of the cab. The weight in his chest, the one he'd carried for weeks, for months, maybe for years without knowing it, had lifted. In its place was something lighter, cleaner. Not happiness, exactly, but peace. He pulled out his phone one last time and called Warren. "It's done," he said simply. "About damn time," Warren replied. "Now go eat something. You look like you've lost 15 pounds. Desmond drove to a small diner 3 blocks from the job site, a place he'd eaten hundreds of times over the years. The vinyl booth creaked under him as he settled in. The waitress, Mary, brought coffee without being asked. "The usual?" she asked. "The usual," he confirmed. She returned with a club sandwich and fries. Desmond ate slowly, methodically, tasting each bite for what felt like the first time in weeks. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming his hands on the coffee cup. The diner's radio played something soft and forgettable. No one stared. No one whispered. The world continued turning. It was the most peaceful meal he had eaten in months. 2 days after the arrests, Desmond stood in his kitchen, watching morning light filter through windows he'd installed himself years ago. The house felt different now, emptier, cleaner somehow. He'd had the locks changed the morning after the arrests, the security code reprogrammed. The black binder labeled "The Receipt" sat centered on the kitchen table where they'd shared thousands of meals. His attorney had arranged the meeting for 10 o'clock. At 9:58, he heard a car door close in the driveway. Precise footsteps on the walkway. A hesitation at the front door before the knock came. Desmond opened the door to find Adrienne standing there in a cream-colored blouse and tailored slacks, dressed for a corporate seminar, not a confrontation. Her makeup was flawless, her posture perfect. Only the slight shadows under her eyes suggested she'd spent 48 hours in county lockup before making bond. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, her voice carrying its usual warm professionalism. Desmond stepped aside to let her enter. She moved through the familiar space with practiced ease, though her eyes flickered briefly to the empty spots where her decorative touches had been. He'd packed those away the night before. The throw pillows she'd chosen, the artful bowl of potpourri, the framed affirmations she hung in the hallway. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Sunlight caught the gold of her wedding ring, still there, still performing its role. The black binder sat between them like a judge's gavel. "I asked for this meeting," Desmond said quietly, "because I want you to understand exactly what I know." He opened the receipt to its first tab. "The life insurance policy you researched 4 years ago. The one you selected the provider for. The one you set the coverage amount on. The one you prepared all the paperwork for and put in front of me to sign." He turned to the next section. "Your private account, opened under your maiden name. 14 months of systematic withdrawals from our joint savings. $310,000 moved in amounts small enough to avoid automatic flags." Adrienne's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "The LLC you formed with Broderick 11 months ago," Desmond continued, his voice steady, "structured specifically to receive and manage a large incoming sum. Your maiden name on the paperwork there, too." He laid out each piece with the same careful precision he used to map electrical systems. "The $15,000 you withdrew in cash for the down payment. The broker Broderick connected you with. The meetings you took with what you thought was a hired killer." He reached for his phone. "And this." Her voice filled the kitchen, clear and cold. "I've been patient for 12 years. I need this done." Tears welled in Adrienne's eyes, perfect, practiced tears that might have moved him once. "Desmond," she said softly, "you don't understand what it's been like. All these years, watching you pour everything into the business while I stood in your shadow. I felt invisible, undervalued, like all the sacrifices I made meant nothing." When he didn't respond, she tried another approach, leaning forward with urgent sincerity. "Broderick, he manipulated me, pressured me. I was afraid of him, of what he might do if I backed out. This wasn't my idea, Des. You have to believe that." Desmond looked at her for a long moment. The woman he'd built a life with. The woman who'd stood beside him in the lean years. The woman who had never really existed. "You picked the insurance policy, Adrienne," he said quietly. "You researched it. You handed me the paperwork. You gave them a photograph of me." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything she couldn't explain away. "I know exactly who you are," he said finally. "I just didn't know it soon enough." He stood, gathering the receipt into his hands. "My attorney will handle everything from here. Leave your key on the table." Without another word, without a backward glance, he walked out of the kitchen. He went to his workshop in the back, where he'd spent countless hours building things with his hands. He stayed there until he heard the front door close, until a car started and pulled away. When he returned to the kitchen, her key sat in the center of the table, catching the afternoon light. He picked it up, walked to the front door, and turned the new deadbolt with a final, decisive click. In the quiet of his home office, Desmond sat at his father's old workbench, now serving as a desk. A single sheet of cream-colored stationery lay before him. He'd chosen it carefully. Heavyweight paper that would hold ink well. The kind of paper that carried weight. "Dear Mrs. Holloway," he wrote, his handwriting measured and clear. He laid out the facts without emotion or accusation. The insurance policy, the private account, the LLC, the recorded meetings, each detail precise as a blueprint. He included nothing about his feelings, nothing about betrayal, just truth, offered as a courtesy to a woman who had always treated him with genuine warmth. At the end, he wrote simply, "I wanted you to hear this from me directly, rather than piece it together from news coverage. I hold no ill feelings toward you. With respect, Desmond Price." He sealed the envelope and delivered it to Gavin Whitmore's office for forwarding. The consequences arrived like dominoes falling in slow motion. Adrienne's attorney, faced with the receipt's meticulous documentation and the crystal-clear audio recording, advised against trial. The plea agreement came quickly. 17 years, eligible for parole after 12. The corporate wellness company she'd built dissolved within weeks. No client would touch a brand associated with attempted murder for hire. The organization that licensed her seminar curriculum terminated her agreement with a public statement distancing themselves. Broderick Wynne, desperate to salvage something, attempted to cooperate against Adrienne. He detailed everything: her initial approach, her enthusiasm for the plan, her careful staging of the murder scenario. The prosecution took his testimony and charged him anyway. 14 years. His major development acquisition collapsed immediately. Two business partners filed civil suits targeting the LLC. His commercial real estate financing evaporated across every active project. In an industry built on reputation, he became radioactive. Desmond sold the house without ceremony. He packed what mattered: his tools, each one maintained with care, his father's sturdy workbench, scarred from decades of honest use, and a single photograph, himself and Warren grinning like boys on the day Price Electric and Build landed its first commercial contract. Everything else he left behind. 20 months passed like water. The Buckhead project finished on time and under budget, generating 3 new contracts in its wake. Price Electric and Build now employed 47 people, most from the West Side neighborhoods where Desmond grew up. He launched the apprenticeship program he'd always wanted, giving young men aging out of foster care the same chance his father had given him: tools, training, and trust. He bought a modest house on a half-acre outside the city, built a workshop out back with his own hands, started crafting furniture on weekends, wide plank oak tables with mortise and tenon joints, built to last generations. He never sold them. He gave them away, to Phyllis, to Warren, to a young couple from his old neighborhood who reminded him of himself at their age. Warren and his wife came every Sunday, filling the house with comfortable noise. They ate too much, argued about football, told the same stories they'd been telling for 20 years. Phyllis brought her family every other week, her husband coaching high school basketball, her teenagers calling him Unc, and raiding his refrigerator without apology. He kept it stocked for them. 2 months after his letter, Claudette Holloway called. For 30 seconds, she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice carried years of weight. "Desmond, I'm so sorry." "Mrs. Holloway," he said gently, "this has nothing to do with you." Early morning light filtered through the workshop windows he'd installed himself, because building was what he knew. The wide plank oak dining table before him was taking shape. Mortise and tenon joints, clean and true. Built to seat 10, built to last 100 years. He ran his hand along the edge, feeling for imperfection. The wood was smooth under his fingers. Somewhere across the state, Adrienne Price entered the correctional facility on a Tuesday. Desmond was in his workshop, sanding oak. He had already forgotten what day it was. He worked until the edge was perfect, because that's what he'd always done: build things that last. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.